Good evening and welcome to Electronic Game Information and the final episode in our E3 2019 coverage. E3 is come and gone again, and now it's time that we take some time to reflect on everything that we've learned, everything that we've discovered, and look forward to the future. But perhaps, more importantly, it's time to reflect and process whatever disappointment you might be feeling, whatever disappointment we all might be feeling. Were you disappointed? Of course you were. I was disappointed many times. For me, the biggest disappointment was the complete lack of any mention of the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn as either a possible standalone re-release with HD graphics, updated textures, and an increased frame rate, or a release of Deep Fear as part of a Sega Saturn Classics compilation. I could do with either. It's been over 20 years since the release of Deep Fear, and I think I know, that people are ready. Ready more now than ever to have deep-sea thrills in an underwater research station. Alan, are you there? Alan?
Dear Robby,
Alan.
Firstly, I would like to apologize for the way I acted on last week's episode of Electronic Game Information. I let my emotions get the best of me and acted in a way that brought shame to my name, this show, my family, and most importantly to you,
Alan,
Robby.
Alan,
I want to assure you that this will never happen again. This should be a professional environment, and from now on it will be. That is my promise to you.
Alan, I appreciate what you're doing. I love what you're doing.
Although I have my differences with Ben and Cricket, I will try to keep that out of the workplace.
Okay,
I'm
so
illegal.
You're being so good right now. You're emotionally available. I love that. But Alan, I have a question then, and this is an important question for me to you. What games would you like to see on a Sega Saturn Classics compilation, or perhaps even a miniature Sega Saturn, a classic Sega Saturn, a miniature one like they have for the Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx 16, and whatever else they might come up with?
It's such an interesting question. Maybe a Sonic game?
Well, there weren't really any Sonic games for the Sega Saturn. There was a collection of Sonic games that had some 3D Sonic elements in it, and had all four of the mainline Sonic games. And that was Sonic Jam, of course.
Okay.
And then there was Sonic R, but I don't think that is it wouldn't necessarily be in a kind of best of compilation. There was also, I will say, there was the Sonic 3D Blast. So
okay.
Was that what you're thinking of? Sonic 3D Blast?
Yes, Robby, I was thinking Sonic 3D Blast would be a good one to include in that collection.
Well, it's
Back
a
to
very
you,
low,
Robby.
it's a low scoring game. I don't think it would be included on a thing like that, but maybe one of those unlockable extras. Anyway, this is an EGI exclusive report. No one else is talking about Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. I mean, my God, can you just imagine if you got a job in an underwater research station 300 meters below the surface of the ocean? I mean, how deep is that? Meter, not yards, meters, 300, 1,200 feet, something like that. That's deep. And you better hope that nothing goes wrong when you're 1,200 meters below the surface of the ocean. I hope nothing goes wrong here, several hundred feet above sea level. So imagine all the things that can go wrong that deep underwater. I guess that's why this game is called Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. Anyway, the story of Deep Fear is this. You're John Mayer, the protagonist from Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. John Mayer makes me think of the British Prime Minister John Major, which is, when did that game come out? Deep Fear came out in 1998. So Deep Fear came out in 1998. John Major was Prime Minister of Great Britain until 1997, it says. So I'm guessing I might be out of line here, but I'm guessing that this game was in development for at least a year before it came out, meaning that John Major would still have been in office. I'm sure it's a different person, but you're John Mayer, a former Navy SEAL who now works for Emergency Rescue Services. Now, you hear that name, Emergency Rescue Services, and you think this sounds like a government thing, right? Sounds official enough, but no. It's a private, non-governmental organization, an NGO, in a massive underwater research station known as the Big Table. The Big Table was, in fact, built by the U.S. government, but due to budget cutbacks to keep the station going, the U.S. government leased out spaces within the Big Table to different corporations and defense contractors. And now this was a game that took on big picture economics, public-private partnerships before that was a thing. And while this public-private partnership isn't a disaster in and of itself, it starts to show some strain after a mysterious space capsule, which had been launched into space 40 years before the Big Table had been in operation. A mysterious capsule lands in the ocean near the Big Table, and inside the capsule is you won't be able to guess it unless you've played the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. Inside the capsule is a chimpanzee, one of mankind's closest relatives, and a frequent participant in experiments on the effects of things on humans. In this case, as we learned early on in the game Deep Fear, this isn't a spoiler, very early on, that the chimpanzee was being used to study the effects of cosmic radiation in deep space. And one of the bigger surprises about this, because let's be honest, we all knew what was happening. One of the biggest surprises about this chimpanzee is that nothing terrible happened. No upsetting thing happened to the chimpanzee, and I think in a situation like what we've got here on Earth, I think that's something to celebrate when nothing bad happens to the chimpanzee. But something did happen to the chimpanzee. Alan, do you want to guess what happened to the chimpanzee?
The chimpanzee, what happened to it?
You want to get, so the chimpanzee was shot into outer space 40 years ago, came back down, and nothing bad happened to it, but something did happen to it.
It met someone in space?
No, it would have been it's an enclosed capsule. The chimpanzee was in the capsule the entire time until he came back down to Earth. Now, he did meet people when he came back down to Earth.
When did this happen?
40 years later.
From when?
1958. So, I had to write this down when I read it for myself. I mean, I
don't have a pen.
The cosmic radiation that the chimpanzee experienced in space caused its metabolism to slow down so much that it went into hibernation. So, like I'm always saying, the chimpanzee got shot into outer space 40 years prior, came back to Earth, and because of its deep hibernation, it does not appear that the chimpanzee, this pivotal being in the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn, it does not appear that this chimpanzee has aged one bit. So can you imagine that? Can you imagine being shot into space 40 years ago, coming back down unchanged? Imagine being that chimpanzee, Alan. Imagine the changes between 1958 and 1998 when Deep Fear came out on the Sega Saturn. Imagine finding yourself in a Sega Saturn survival horror game in 1998. What a ride.
Yes, Robbie, I can hear you. It's quite a wild ride you're describing. A chimpanzee was in space and came back young.
40 years ago, Alan, were you born?
Say that. Well,
so
when are we talking about? What are the years we're talking about?
We're talking about 40 years, 4 decades, 40. Chimpanzee shot into outer space 40 years ago, 1958, the height of the space race between us and the Reds.
When did the chimp come back?
1998. So John Major had been out of office for a year.
Right. So a lot had happened.
A lot had happened. John Major had come into power. It was largely finishing up a lot of the stuff that Margaret Thatcher had set into motion.
When were you born?
That's not. You were not there. I was not there in 1958.
But when the chimp came back, we were here. So that's a big change.
So it's like that's one of the many changes that could have happened between 1958 and 1998. is that you and me were here.
Robby, I just want you to know that I am listening and I am paying attention. I do understand everything you've been talking about.
All right, thank you for back to you, Alan. Now, I don't have a time machine, but if I did, one of the many things that I'd do is go back and have the developers of Deep Fear spend a little more time trying to figure out just what the hell was going through the mind of that chimpanzee. I mean, maybe make the chimpanzee an unlockable character with its own little campaign like the Resident Evil 2 with the tofu man and the soldier. His name was Bert or something. Moving on, Deep Fear doesn't just end with the arrival of an old chimpanzee on the big table. Shortly after that, we have another thing happening, and let's be clear, this is a 2-disc CD-ROM game for the Sega Saturn, so a lot has yet to happen. The next thing that happens is, of course, a submarine called the Sea Fox, which has been sent with a crew to investigate the chimpanzee, crashes into the big table, and things really start to heat up because the radiation coming from the capsule causes people to become monster versions of themselves. And it's up to former British Prime Minister John Major to solve the problem, pitting him and his emergency rescue services, the NGO, not a government organization, an NGO, just like Margaret Thatcher would have wanted, it hit their skills up against the horrific monsters that used to be their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, all over the big table. In Deep Fear, you are trapped hundreds of meters below the surface of the ocean, cut off from the outside world, and struggling to contain whatever cosmic contagion has spread inside of the underwater research station. So let's go to the phones, see what people are saying about the exclusion of Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn from E3 2019. Hello, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
Hey, Robby, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Absolutely.
Love the show. Love what you're doing.
Love what you're doing. Love that you're calling in. Love the enthusiasm. E3 2019 is behind us. We're looking forward to Deep Fear. Some sort of movement of people is going to have to get this thing rolling, you know?
Oh, I hear you. I hear you.
So have you yourself played Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn?
I haven't played it.
Well, let me tell you something. If you are in the mood ever to experience deep-sea underwater thrills, if you want to play as former British Prime Minister John Major in this type of game, I think you can't go wrong. You just can't. Thank you for your call. Alan, what are people saying in the chat about Deep Fear? Because I know that we have gone through a lot this year.
Yes.
We've discussed a lot of things, but here what's most important is the damn games.
Yes.
And if we're not talking about games, what the hell are we doing?
Yes, absolutely. Good point. I can hear you. I'm in the chat. EINRs says, man, imagine being a chimp being sent in space in the 50s, in the time of the post-war welfare state consensus, and coming back in the 90s.
Uh-huh. So
it's getting political, so I'm not going to I don't really know what they're trying to say.
The post-war period that they might be describing, because I bet you a nickel that this guy or person is perhaps a citizen of the United Kingdom, because they're using words that those UK folks use. And I'm thinking that they're talking about the post-war consensus, which, of course,
hello,
Margaret Thatcher and John Major helped to dismantle.
Very interesting.
So, caller, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking mostly about Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. If you've got something to say about British politics in the 1990s to the early 2000s, I'm glad to hear it, but we got to be as focused as possible on Deep Fear underwater research stations.
Yeah, I probably know equally as little about both of those topics, but I know because I never played Deep Fear, but I've always wanted to, and I actually also was kind of hoping that they'd re-release it this E3 because I had heard rumors about them doing that, but
it would be a coup. I tell you, you could put out games like Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. It would be a coup to put these overlooked gems of the 90s CD-ROM horror games, Deep Fear, Overblood, all these weird games that people don't talk about anymore because some shiny Leon Kennedy character came through and wiped the slate clean. It's like and put their foot down, their jackboot down, and made it so the only goddamn horror game we talk about, except for Silent Hill, is Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to get that sort of like Lovecraftian like terror as opposed to just horror. You know, like in some older games like that, especially like with the concept of like, you know, the everybody being like monster versions of themselves, and like
Absolutely,
where it's something where it's like very uncanny valley, where everything's like sort of the same but off in a terrifying manner. It's the same thing I sort of loved about Lisa the Joyful.
Absolutely. And also what you're just describing, it reminds me of how important those first two Alone in the Dark games are. I mean, you can go back to those games they released, and a long time ago, they look crazy, but they make you, they still send a chill up my spine. Just I don't even want to think about Alone in the Dark sometimes. Just there's a weird moment where you're approaching the house for the first time. There's a hand on the shade, and it looks like a lizard's hand. Crazy stuff. Thank you for your call. Alan, what are people saying in the chat? We got people keyed up. We got people talking about Deep Fear. People didn't expect to be talking about Deep Fear.
Yes.
People probably wanted to talk about something like Hideo Kojima's new game, Deadly Alliance. What is that game called?
Death Stranded.
Death Stranding.
Uneasy Robotic Leg says Deep Fear should be Game of the Year.
Deep Fear.
There is love for this game you're talking about that I don't know about.
I can't imagine that it. You know, even in the heightened state that I feel like I'm in right now, because I'm riding high on this Deep Fear wave, I can't even imagine putting it out on Game of the Year pedestal. But I could put it out on Best Remake of the Year if they updated it with new textures, a higher frame rate, and maybe you know, some extras, some like behind the scenes look. I want to see some concept art. Caller, you're on the air. We're talking about Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
Yeah, what the fuck? I'm watching you guys right now. That's amazing. It's late. I'm like 23. I don't think I was alive.
You're late. You're 23. You're 23 years old. So that means that you were born just around the time the chimpanzee came back from outer space. So that's got to be something that you're keeping in your head as we're going through this whole process of understanding and extrapolating what Deep Fear really means to us. Because for me, the idea of being shot into space, coming back down 40 years later as the same person you were, and having the whole world moved on. This isn't like prison. The metabolism was slowed down. Thank you for your call. Alan, we're coming up on the break, but we just want to do one last check-in on the chat. How are you feeling? How are they feeling? What's up?
I feel good, Robbie. I'm just happy to be back in your good graces. Apologies again for my behavior.
Apologies accepted, Alan. If you were on the big table, I would be sure to visit you there. We have a special EGI exclusive special thing. This is something that no one else is talking about. No one else is showing this kind of stuff. We have made a wonderful compilation, a video montage of some of the greatest moments, some of the most memorable scenes from the game Deep Fear. Don't worry, nothing in here will spoil your enjoyment of Deep Fear when it eventually comes out on a Sega Saturn Classics compilation or a Sega Saturn Mini.
Sharon was worried that you were mad.
I'm not mad. More importantly, Mookie, how's the little shark?
Best conditions. Like the Yankees in '96. Why? What's up?
An accident in the Navy area. We're the first to go in. Hey, this is no joke, Mookie. You've got an important job to do. I'll fill you in later. You found Anthony?
Yes. Are we clear from the meltdown danger?
Yes, but I couldn't save everyone.
I think you're doing wonderful, John. Don't get down on yourself.
Oh, we're all together.
Anthony is in a bad mood, so I'm going to head back to the ERS room.
Okay, Gina. Thanks.
You're welcome. I forgot to tell you. The monsters. About the parasite cells.
Yeah. How much longer will the base last? Stella.
It's Danny. You're still around, Johnny boy.
I'll go with Danny to the Navy area and wait for help. Go ahead. I'll protect you.
Okay.
I've had it with him. He bit me, and he's a troublemaker. Go over to your owner. Okay, I'll push the button in the control room. Wait. I don't trust Clancy. Did you know that he sank a passenger ship on purpose?
He said it was an accident.
That was no accident. The sonar person warned him that a civilian ship was approaching.
You seem to know a lot.
Of course, I was the sonar person. That's why I can't trust him. People trying to get to Washington tried to cover it up, but it was found out in an internal check and taken to court-martial. That's why he was sent here. He's the type who will kill a man for his career.
Anyway, get ready to escape.
Already there. Just have to move to the Navy area.
There are a lot of creatures over there. How do you get to the energy unit area?
There are a lot of different ways. Sharon knows that area well. Try going to the sea farm. Leave the area lock up to me, is what I'd like to say, but this is out of gas.
Okay, Mookie, let's slide on into home.
Hurry up and get out, Mookie.
Just a fantastic compilation of some of the most memorable scenes from Deep Fear. I can still remember just thinking about that scene where he gets the email and puts it on a disc. It's just real spellbinding stuff. You don't see stuff like that anymore. Alan, you here with me? Alan?
Yeah, which one was Mookie?
Mookie is the little boy. He loves baseball. Alan, we have some wonderful.
But other people call.
Mookie.
But he said hi to Mookie.
Well, he's referring to himself in the third person. Kids do that all the time. When I was a kid, I was like, Robbie needs this. Robbie's got to get picked up.
But then someone else was being called Mookie.
Robbie ran out for a few hours to get batteries. I would say these things to the people around me because it was you were discovering yourself. So that's what's happening to Mookie in those clips that we just showed.
And that was something called Deep Fear?
It's Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn, and it's just one of those games that, it came out, nobody talked about it, and all of a sudden now we're talking about it. And I think if nothing else, that's just a miracle. And I just for the life, I can't stop thinking about the damn chimpanzee.
Yes.
Anyway, we've got some wonderful fan art here. We've got fan art that was sent in since last week. We got to take a quick look at some of this wonderful stuff, Alan. I know how much you love the fan art. We've got a wonderful drawing here. It's you and me. It says Electronic Game Info meets Animal Crossing, and it's a picture of you and me, and we look like Animal Crossing characters.
Great.
Alan, we've got those little triangle noses.
Oh yeah.
You look like you've lost some weight in this image.
My beard doesn't connect.
It's just a wonderful image of the two of us together in Animal Crossing. Our
What's
green
in your
Crocs
hand?
are there. The green Crocs are there. In my hand is a Sega Dreamcast controller. How about that? We're talking all about the Sega Saturn stuff, but some people are thinking about Sega Dreamcast stuff. And this was from Ashley H. Ashley H, a friend of the show, beautiful drawing. Right here is a beautiful drawing of Ben and Cricket from. If you remember the videos from last week, that's Ben and Cricket from their experience with the G fuel gamer juice. And if you can see there, the green juice it is, so it's keyed out a little bit, but they're drowning in the juice. They're dead. Thank you so much to Lindsay Yang for drawing these wonderful dead people. This is Alan.
Wait, what is that?
This is a picture of you. My dear friend Alan is looking great, looking happy. He's surrounded by big people.
I like that.
Nice
Robby.
big lady on one side with the high heels. I assume that's a lady.
Robby, can you set that aside?
I can set it aside, Alan. You're looking up. You're having a great time. It says we love you, Alan.
Yeah, I love that.
It's just a really remarkable thing. You know, you say some things on this show and you think that no one's listening, but Alan, people
Can you
are
show
listening.
it again?
Matt Pierce is.
Can you show that?
Pierce is listening. He knows what you like.
Thank you, Matt.
He's gonna be thinking about this.
Robby, I want to keep that.
We're gonna keep it aside for you, Alan. It's just for you. Here's another one. It's me and you. It's you've given me a nice big old hug. Our eyes are brown, which I think is an interesting choice. Is that a thing? Eyes brown?
I do have brown eyes. I do have brown eyes.
I
think you do too.
But here they look more like the acorn brown eyes, and it's a sweet picture. We look like beautiful Charlie Brown characters, just having a great time, squeezed up, thinking about Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. Think about all of the ways, all the different parts of the big table that are explorable, and just hoping that nothing too crazy happens to us down there. 1,200 feet below the surface of the ocean. That's a beautiful drawing by Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Here's another great, excellent painterly piece by Lindsay Yang. She was the one who drew our dear friends Ben and Cricket. And it's us. Greetings from E3. There's the flamingos you see in the background there, over that shoulder.
Yes,
and
I look happy.
You look happy.
mad.
You look tall. You look strong.
I look as tall as you in that.
You look taller than me because here I'm hunched over. I look like a golem, and it's just amazing what people feel, what people say. I'm sweating a lot. That's great. It's summertime. It's Los Angeles. It's not quite as hot as it might be in other parts of the country, but you still sweat when you're outside and you're in the sun. You're active. You sweat, and people forget that. So thank you, Lindsay. Nacho Cheese sent this one in. This is a drawing of
Nacho
us
Cheese.
climbing that monument.
At E3.
At E3, the Sonic and Mario Olympic monument. That we climbed together, held hands. It says friendship. If you remember the great line from Mortal Kombat 2, you have the opportunity to kill someone, rip their arms off, pull their hearts out, but instead you press another sequence of buttons, and what do you get? Friendship. So that's one from Nacho Cheese.
Thank you, Nacho Cheese, for the friendship drawing. I am best friends with Robby, and I do love him.
EGI baby. That's us. Looking great. Great drawing. I'm doing an interesting touch to my hand.
Wait, what was it?
It's EGI baby. So I assume that's what that extra E is for. Baby. And we're obviously just sitting together. I look like I might be having a serious thought. You might be having some kind of a time. But Maxwell,
it's very nice. It looks like almost like a photograph.
It's almost like a photograph. You're right.
But
exactly.
It's black and white, and parts of my costume are missing.
And you can, of course, because of the problem that we've been having, but you have a solution, an interesting solution. It ruined a couple of pieces of our hardware, but
I think it's okay.
That's why shows have a budget, and so we'll make sure that comes out of your fee, obviously. But it's going to get fixed. And so Maxwell Shark sent that in. This is a fan art of the list. Fan art of the list from friend of the show, Moop. Friend of the show, Moop, of course, loves the list. Send in this wonderful. It's just a green image, and it's just the words
list.
"Fan art of the list."
Right.
I love you, list. So that's from Moop. Great,
friend of the
great.
show. Thank you, Moop.
Thank you, Moop. Thank
that
you,
looks
list.
So good.
We love the list. We love the list.
Because the list, Robby, the list is a segment that you do in the show, and that's so. Yes, people drew it.
Yeah, well, it's its own thing. It's obviously it's a separate. It's how it works. And this is another drawing from Lindsay. This is you and me, or we're just you're covered in that stuff that what do you put on yourself, Alan?
Just baby powder.
Just baby powder, so it's toxic to eat. So you would not want to put it on a donut, but here it is on a donut anyway, and here I am eating it. Probably about to have a stomach ache.
Alan's so cute.
It's a cute one, Alan. You're sweet. You're a sweet guy.
Sweet and sugary like a donut.
You're sweet and sugary like a donut. You're unhealthy like a donut. And anyway, this is the last piece of art that we have, which is just a wonderful, this drawing of you and me that I feel like is just really it encompasses a lot of the show. And
I don't really understand
it. Says electronic game information. It's from AVI or AVI. It could be AVI, could be the video
compression,
codec. AVI is
container,
audio visual
It's audio. It's artificial video encoding.
Artificial encoding sent us this wonderful picture. It's a drawing of me. I look, I look happy. I look healthy. Nice little polygonal lines. You can't really see it a close up of that, but there's these nice little white lines that show the seams and the polygons that make up the image, just like an old N64 or PlayStation game, Alan. It's just remarkable stuff what people can do. I mean, if you think about what the chimpanzee knew as art, and it's you come back from such a long trip and you go to sleep and you wake up and everything's different. So let's talk some more about Deep Fear, because there's one of the many interesting things about Deep Fear, 300 meters below sea level in an underwater research station, is you're going to have one problem. Well, before any monsters start showing up and chasing you around, former British Prime Minister John Major from the Sea Farm area to the problem that I'm talking about is H2O. See, this is something a lot of us take for granted, but these underwater research stations that we have, that we know that they're down there, they all rely on contrived ways of delivering oxygen to their inhabitants. In some cases, it's probably delivered in canisters, like any other deep-sea diver might recognize. Canisters are bigger. We can only assume that if these canisters are the way that they're doing the artificial oxygen, that these canisters need to be delivered regularly to the big table. New full canisters delivered regularly. Old empty ones taken away. And that said, this delivery service would almost certainly cease in the event of a spaceborne disease being released into the big table by the arrival of the Sea Fox and the capsule. So in other case, maybe there's could be that there is a big greenhouse where the human emitted carbon dioxide is transferred into oxygen, but we don't need to talk about photosynthesis. The air is fed back throughout the station, probably using air ducts and fans. So if you can just imagine, there's plenty of opportunities for exploration in the big table thanks to those air ducts. So let me be clear. I don't know if John Major, former British Prime Minister John Major, goes into the air ducts or not. I haven't played Deep Fear. I haven't played the game. It was region locked, and I did not do the whole import thing. I did not have a game store that helped me with that back when I was that age. So I never got the opportunity to play Deep Fear, but I bet if the air duct system on the big table is big enough for a man or a woman or someone who just doesn't want to be pigeonholed by society's artificial gender binary if those air ducts are big enough for just a person to fit into, you can bet John Major is going into the air ducts. Air ducts are always a great way to slow down action in video games while also ratcheting up the tension, but most importantly, they slow down the action. So I have not played Deep Fear. I just don't know. Hopefully someone at Sega sees this video, takes it to the head of the company, and demands that they release a miniature Sega Saturn preloaded with classics like Deep Fear, Dragon Force, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Now there's a game, Alan. Did you ever play Panzer Dragoon Saga?
Panzer Dragoon Saga?
Saga. S-A-G-A. Panzer Dragoon Saga. Like Banner Saga, but Panzer Dragoon.
No, I don't know what that is, but guess what, Robbie?
Alan,
guess what?
You remember when we were watching the Nintendo Direct together? You came over to my house. We had a big brunch. We watched the Nintendo Direct. So much fun.
I love doing that. Thank you for letting me come to your house.
You're welcome. It's a tidy house. We have some rules, especially when it comes to when you wear your shoes inside. We do try to keep it a tight ship. Not as tight of a ship as an underwater research station might be, but a tight ship nonetheless. So anyway, do you remember during the Nintendo Direct, I got so excited because they had Panzer Dragoon on the Nintendo Direct.
Oh, yeah.
So Panzer Dragoon was the first game in a trilogy of games for the Sega Saturn that culminated in Panzer Dragoon Saga.
I thought that was just a video, like a movie or a video. I didn't think that was a game. But Robbie, guess what?
What?
When on the other episode you kept talking about Stardew Valley?
Yeah, of course. I was talking about Stardew Valley a lot.
Well, guess what?
What?
I got Stardew Valley. I don't normally play games that are ugly and look old, but you made it sound so fun that I said I'm gonna get Stardew Valley. I've been playing it.
It's a fun game, Alan.
I didn't think I would like it, but it's fun.
Well, this is all right. Well, this is us.
Fun.
This is us talking. So, what do you like about Stardew Valley? I'm talking about a game I like. Let's talk about a game you like.
It's very fun. I have a couple hang-ups. I go into town every morning, and I look at the bulletin board on Pierre's business.
Yeah, Pierre is the shopkeeper in Stardew Valley. Everybody knows Pierre. You go early on in the game,
but I don't understand some of okay, there's that sometimes people are like, I want you to come to my house. I want you to deliver something to me personally, and they'll pay you to do it.
Right. Yeah. So that's how you build friendships. You maintain friendships, and you build your different types of relationships come from that.
But it doesn't always. It's okay. So it's confusing because sometimes it doesn't always make sense because there was a bulletin. There was someone posted. Shane posted. I want a dandelion. I'll pay $150 for a dandelion.
They're not dollars, but
I looked everywhere for Shane. I couldn't find him.
Well, you can always catch Shane on his way to work at the JoJo place.
But I didn't. But okay.
What's the name of the place? You played
JoJo Mart.
JoJo Mart. So if you catch Shane in the morning on his way to JoJo Mart,
he wasn't there. I didn't catch him.
You'll catch him eventually, Alan. We're talking about Panzer Dragoon Saga.
No, Robbie, I'm not done. I'm not done because here's
We're talking about Panzer Dragoon Saga.
Let me just get this out.
That was a game.
Robbie, let me just get this out because I don't understand the core part of the game.
Spread out over 4 different discs. So as far as Sega Saturn games go, you'd struggle to find a game with more discs than Panzer Dragoon Saga. I mean, goodness gracious, D for the Sega Saturn had only 2 discs, and that game was almost all FMV sequences. Alan, how many discs do you think Kenji Ino's Saturn exclusive follow-up to D? How many Enemy Zero? How many discs do you think Enemy Zero had? Because this is a game where you cannot see your enemies. You can only hear them and shoot at them wherever you think that you might be based on where they are. So it's all about listening. It's all about guessing where your enemies are and shooting them in underwater research station and Deep Fear above the sky research station in Enemy Zero, or it's a ship.
Is it, I don't know, like
so
a digital download?
Discs?
Was it digital download?
No, Enemy Zero was a game that came out on the Sega Saturn. It's a disc based, it's a CD-ROM game. The late Kenji Ino, one of the great unsung heroes of the video games in the 90s, put out Enemy Zero. So how many discs, Alan? 4 discs. 4 discs, just as many as Panzer Dragoon Saga. This is an EDI exclusive. No one else is talking about Enemy Zero or Deep Fear. Deep Fear spread its fantastic story over just 2 discs, which leads me to believe that it would not be hard to cram all that old chimpanzee action onto a miniature Sega Saturn. So now, as I was saying about Oxygen, one of Deep Fear's most unique gameplay mechanics is that the big table is slowly losing its oxygen supply due to all of the circumstances with the old chimpanzee and the submarine and the crash and all the monsters. So in addition to all of the action, the breathtaking horror action playing as former Navy SEAL and former British Prime Minister John Major, you must also monitor oxygen levels throughout the station. It's on the ocean floor, but it might as well be on the surface of the moon. A big part of the game revolves around ensuring that you just have enough air to breathe, using oxygen grenades to top off your oxygen levels. There's a breathing regulator. You also have to fuss around the actual air system, which is what I assume the air ducts are for, if they're there. But from what I understand, using your firearms inside of the big table depletes the amount of available air. So obviously, there's a lot to worry about because whenever you try and shoot something, you end up killing yourself a little bit due to the depleted oxygen levels. So Deep Fear, it's hard to get your hands on unless you have a way to play imported Sega Saturn games or the patience to get a Saturn emulator running on your PC. So we only have the hopes that someone at Sega will see this report, be inspired to assemble a crack team of people to create a miniature Sega Saturn with preloaded games, some of which never came out in the United States, including Deep Fear. If you are interested in horror, and don't you always hate saying that word? Don't you always hate saying that you want to say terror, or if scared was a word that could be changed? obscure horror action games that take place in or on the ocean. If you are interested in that, you can always track down Carrier for the Sega Dreamcast, Cold Fear for the Xbox, PlayStation 2. This is an EGI exclusive report. No one else is talking about this. Let's go to the calls. Hello, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about deep sea thrills.
Deep sea?
As in deep fear in the ocean, in the underwater research station. What gets you going? What's the scariest thing that you've ever seen?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been having an identity crisis in terms of the games I've been playing lately. I think an underwater game would really be up my alley.
Yeah.
Scariest thing, dealing with myself, dealing with my emotions, maybe the disappointment.
Yes.
I was calling in to ask, how do you deal with disappointment, Robbie?
Well, the way that I deal with disappointment is quite simple. I put myself into situations where I have to live in the moment to react as quickly as possible to things like all of my friends and colleagues that I'm working together in a research station as they change into creatures that I cannot control. People that I knew are becoming people that I don't know. And that's, if you're talking about how to, get away from that disappointed feeling that you feel in yourself, just put yourself into a dangerous situation that you don't think you'll survive. Thank you for your call, Alan.
Sure.
What are we saying on the chat?
I finally find Shane, and I said, here's a dandelion, and he says, I hate that, because it was like a timed event. He only wanted it for like a day, and then after that day, he said he hated it.
There's mini quests that are timed. There's ones that you can take a long time with. Don't mess around with Shane. He's an alcoholic. We got a caller on the line. Caller, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. We're talking about Deep Fear. We are dedicating this whole episode to Deep Fear.
Yeah, Deep Fear. I know. I was watching that.
Okay, so
what's
what are you thinking?
about?
Because here's what I'm thinking. Because I can't remember if meters and yards are the same.
Meters and yards?
Is that the same? It's like they're different words for the same length. Doesn't matter. The point is that if you had a Sega Saturn and you were looking to get scared, to have some fun, to invite some friends over to show them what the Sega Saturn could do, and why it was a smart investment to get a Saturn as opposed to a PlayStation, you'd probably go with Deep Fear, right?
Oh, definitely. I missed that game.
You missed the game. You missed Deep Fear. You missed seeing. Do you remember the chimpanzee?
Sega Saturn?
No, the chimpanzee. We're talking about Anthony, the chimpanzee. His name's Anthony.
What's up with him?
He's 40. He's 40 years older than he was before the game even started. So thank you for your call, Alan. Let's take your. What are people saying about Anthony? What are people? Because I'm trying to wrap my head around this thing. It's like time travel, but not really.
Right. Yes, Robbie, I can hear you. A friend of the show, Moop, has
Moop
said, my biggest fear is a pet dying in my care. Sad face. So that is scary.
It's a terrible deep fear that we all have, that pets die. We are faster. We are faster in some ways, but we're slower in others. We've got big brains.
Dr. Who 42 asks, does Alan want to marry Shane?
Alan does not want to marry Shane because Shane is an alcoholic, and you should not be chasing that, because that is a disaster waiting to happen. That's pain.
I'll take your word for it. I will probably marry Sam or Pam.
Got a caller on the line. Caller, you're on the air with Electronic Game Information. Alan's not going to marry Shane. He's going to probably marry someone nice like the doctor, and we'll just put Shane in a box. Put Shane in a box and send him away express mail. You don't want that trouble in your life. Caller?
Robbie, it's me. It's the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
It's the game. You're trying to tell me that you are the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
I am the game Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. I'm here to answer all of your questions related to Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
All right. Well, my big question is always the same question, which is that you spend so much time focusing on this John Major guy, and what you need to be focusing on is the life and times of this frickin' patriot, because that's what an animal that gets shot into space, an animal that experiences that high level, that high altitude for so long, that has its metabolism slow down, it doesn't age, it's been up there, it comes back, all of its friends are gone. why didn't you spend more time with that than you did with this Tory guy?
It's important to remember, Robbie, because I am Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. It's important to remember that those monkeys were not real. They were in me. Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. They're not real monkeys.
I disagree. I think you're talking about what you're talking about is dangerous. That's dangerous talk. Because
I don't understand who this is.
It's Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn. When you make those distinctions between people, what's real and what's not, in the context that you got to have a reason to be there. I'm in the underwater research station. I'm at the big table. I'm fighting to keep my friends alive. I'm fighting to figure out what's up with the weird chimpanzee that showed up, caused all the trouble in the first place. I need to be active. I need to be feeling like emotionally involved. And what you're talking about makes me feel like nothing matters and no one should be emotionally involved. And if that was the real thing that we all understood and we all internalized, then none of us would be here in the first place. We'd all be off in, I don't know. Yeah, Alan, what's up?
Robbie.
Can I talk to Deep Fear?
Yeah, Deep Fear, you're on the line now with Alan Resnick. Alan Resnick is not marrying Shane. He's going to marry the doctor.
Or Sam. Deep Fear, can you hear me?
Alan, I can hear you. It's me, Deep Fear for the Sega Saturn.
Okay, just a quick question. What the heck kind of game are you? Why does the game look so weird? Why is everyone so strange in it? I don't really understand what this is.
Alan, you've got to remember, I am Deep Fear. I go into your Sega Saturn. You play me, you go very deep, and you become very afraid, Alan. When you go so deep, it gets real frightening.
Alan, I think what Deep Fear is trying to say, Deep Fear is trying to say is that we've got, the Sega Saturn was built to be the ultimate 2D machine, so it had some trouble. It did have some trouble rendering those 3D graphics that you saw just now. Those were FMV sequences, of course, but even then, it had some trouble. It was not built for 3D. It was built for games like Guardian Heroes and Legend of Oasis. So thank you for your call, Deep Fear. We'll continue the discussion online on the chat. We'll keep listening to you. We do have one more special treat for you. This is a special treat. This is the scene, one of the most pivotal scenes in the game Deep Fear. It is when John Major finds out what happens to the real Colonel McCoy. He finds out what happens to his friend Colonel McCoy.
Is someone there?
Who are you?
John Mayer, ERS.
Can't get away from you. It's me, McCoy.
Colonel McCoy?
Stay where you are. Listen from there. The time I have left is short.
No.
Yes. My body is being taken over by a creature. I can't remember. I was called Iron Fist. I'm reaching my end. John, there's something I want to tell you.
What?
About Stella. At the time of the accident, you probably tried all you could to save her.
Yes.
These 3 years, I needed to talk to you, but if I did, I would blame myself for letting you and Stella go.
Colonel McCoy.
Don't come any closer. I don't want you to see me like this. I always thought of you as a brother. I wanted to give this to you after you and Stella got married. It's a Colt, M1991A1. It's from my father's generation. The pride of a strong America. I wanted to give you this.
Colonel McCoy.
Okay. Go. Iron Fist is gonna take his last shot.
What are you gonna do?
I'm gonna blow this place! Get out of here! John! Kill a creature for me!
Riveting stuff. And now it's time, of course, for the list. And the list tonight is, of course, with the game Deep Fear in our heads, in our minds, in our hearts. The list is games that take place on ships. And this is important. The difference is that the games that I'm going to be talking about take place on ships, but are not about actually driving ships or piloting ships. You're not going to be, it's not like games where you're going to be boating around. You know what I'm talking, Alan, you know what I'm talking about? We're talking about games that take place on ships.
Yes, games that take place on ships. Robbie, when I get married, I want you to give me a gun.
Okay, Alan, you're getting a gun for the wedding, unless you marry Shane, because I would not trust him with a gun. We got callers on the line coming in for the list. People want to add. People are already so keyed up. Deep Fear has really gotten these people going. Everybody wants to talk about games that take place on ships. Caller, you're on the air with electronic game information. Let's put a game that takes place on a ship on the list.
I did play Pirates, Vikings, and Knights. That game didn't take place on a ship, but there were ships in it you could be on.
You could be on the ship, but in what capacity? Because it can't go on the list if there wasn't a substantial part of the game on the ship. Because if you think about it, it's not a game that takes place on a ship. If it takes place mostly on land, but you go to the ship just to organize your inventory or something like that.
Robbie.
Well, then the clear answer would be Black Flag, Assassin's Creed, for sure.
Assassin's Creed Black Flag does take place. A lot of the Black Flag takes place on the list. It's on the list. It's Black Flag, and of course the expansions that came after it. Caller, do you remember those expansions?
I didn't play the expansions. I only played the base game.
Okay, so the base game, Assassin's Creed 4. Pirate Black Flag on the list. Alan, what are people saying on the chat?
People in the chat know all sorts of ship games. Weird Ami says Seven Cities of Gold is a ship game.
7 Cities of Gold. I don't know. I've never played Seven Cities of Gold, but it sounds like a city game. So I'm not sure if it goes on the list.
Steel Diver from the Game Quoter
is a game that is a game where you drive a ship, so it's not on the list.
Uncharted
we got
Waters.
Another call on the air. We call her on the line. We got games that take place on ships putting on the list. Caller, you're on the air with electronic game information. You got to give me a game that takes place on a ship. I can't live without this list.
Hi, Robbie.
Yes.
Let me think.
I got it. Okay, so a game that takes place on a ship, but not a ship-based game like Steel Diver.
Okay, game that takes place. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does an airship count?
Nope.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, that's
we'll do it. Caller, thank you for your call. We got to move on, but I promise you this: we will do a game that takes place on airships sometime in the future, or we will have something to do with airships. I don't know if there's enough games to fill out the list with just games that take place on the airships. Although the games like Final Fantasy games, obviously you drive around on the airship, but it's not mostly on the airship. Alan, what are people saying about the airship?
Nacho Cheese says System Shock 2 takes place.
System Shock 2, it takes place on
a ship.
On an outer space ship. We're talking about boat ships. We're not talking about spaceships or airships. We got another call
says Parasite Eve.
Caller, are you on the air with electronic game information? Parasite Eve has, I think it does have some sections on a ship.
Okay,
so
it's on the list.
It might be on the list. If someone could just tell me if Parasite Eve, someone in this room could please tell me if Parasite Eve has a section on the list. Caller, if you are on the list, if you're on the line, you're on the list.
Yeah. I would say Sid Meier's Pirates.
Sid Meier's Pirates is a game where you drive ships, so it's not on the list. This is the rules of the game. The rules of the list are that the game has to be substantially on the ship, but you don't drive the ship. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if Black Flag should be on the list. Alan, what? I mean, I put Black Flag on the list.
I don't understand what this list is, Robbie, because that sounds like a ship.
Okay, it's not. It's on a ship. You're driving the ship around. I'm just talking about where you're running around the ship. You're solving puzzles. I'm thinking more like Cold Fear. So like Cold Fear, not Deep Fear, because caller, are you still with me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay.
So
what about? Okay.
So I've been talking a lot about deep fear.
It's buildings on ships in the sky.
No, it's ships. You're on the ship and maybe you're exploring the ship, like Resident Evil Revelations, this game that's on the list. You got me? You feel me? Cold Fear is a game that's on the list. You're exploring the ship. You're unlocking doors. It's not just there to drive around, and it's not just there to store your stuff. It's a game that takes place on it, but it's just a level. It's not more. It's more than just a level. It's the game. So Deep Fear is not on the list, even though we've been talking so much about Deep Fear. Because caller, can you tell me why?
Because it's not on the ship. It's in an underwater facility similar to...
It's an underwater research station. It's an underwater research station. It's partially controlled by the government, partially controlled by corporations and defense contractors. So, Alan, what are people saying about that? Because I think people might be wondering what the point is of having so much time to talk about Deep Fear when...
They don't understand the list. Tiny Tilapia says Motorboat, the Twin Ships. It sounds like maybe that's a game about being on a ship. I don't know that
That's a game about driving. There's a ship driving games. It's like you're talking about Hydro Thunder or something. And it's like, that's not on the list. If we're going to do a boat racing game, that would be its own list.
People have a lot of suggestions, but these games don't make sense on the list because the rules of this list are weird.
I'm trying to tell everybody, if everyone just calms down for a few seconds, takes a deep breath, and listens to the rules. These are games that take place on ships. These are games where the ship isn't actually driven around, and you can go off the ship sometimes. So, caller, give us a game on the list.
SOS for the Super Nintendo.
SOS Super Nintendo.
You crash into something, it's all about escaping.
It's all about escaping the ship. We got to get off that ship. There's too many. The ship's going down. We're breaking out. We're going to survive. We look at each other. We see each other across the maw, and we say what? Caller, what do we say to each other?
What?
We say we're getting off this ship, but we're not piloting it.
We're not piloting. We're getting off the ship. We're not piloting, and we're going to survive. Thank you for your call, caller. We got SOS for the Super Nintendo on the list, with Cold Fear and maybe Parasite Eve. Caller, we got another call on the line. Caller, we got Parasite Eve. What's the deal with Parasite Eve? I know that we got Parasite Eve. You got museums, you got police stations and office buildings, but do we have ships?
I don't know. I've never played that game.
You got to play Parasite Eve, because if we don't, we don't know what games go on the list unless people play the game.
I will play it for you. I will play it for you.
All right. Well,
just like how
play Parasite
Alan
Eve.
played Stardew Valley for you. I will do that.
Okay. But
I
all
will
right.
take
So
your word.
You know the rules of the list. You know the rules of the list. You have all the rules in your head. So what? Give me a game for the list. This is games that take place on ships.
That's on the Steam platform. That one's on a ship, but you're not driving it around. You're walking in it.
You're walking on the ship. What type of ship is it?
I think it was a cruise ship.
It's a cruise ship. It's called Ship.
That sounds like it's on the. That sounds like a list.
And this is the problem with all these Steam games. There's so many damn games.
Right? That's the problem. We'll never get through it.
We'll never get through them all. We'll live 1,000 years before they'll keep putting out. The ship sounds great because you're on the ship. You're not piloting the ship. You're just there to explore.
Mm-hmm. Robbie, what about a game where you're on an old cruise ship and there's no one else on it? It's haunted, and you go in all the different doors, and in the doors there's like notes or little audio cassettes from people who died on the boat.
Oh, that sounds great.
Whoa,
that sounds like
really
a great
cool.
walking simulator on a ship. Is that you got a name for that game?
No, not yet. But I'll come up with
Alan,
one.
is this going to be your game?
Alan, before the caller says anything, because the caller's trying to get you to do one thing, I'm going to try to get you to do something else. I think we should put that section of the game that you just described, we should put that into the game that I made up.
Whoa, collab.
No, it's a collab. It's an EGI exclusive collaboration.
Really?
What do you think?
I think that would be so
cool,
Robbie. You really would put that in your game?
Absolutely.
Like maybe the boat is like near Gloomsbrook, and you go out from the fog, and there's a boat.
But Gloomsbrook is near a river, so
maybe
it makes
it's a riverboat.
sense because the river's connected to the ocean.
Yeah.
If you go
It's
back,
like
and you know that we talked about
It could be like an old riverboat with like a gambling.
No, it's not a riverboat. It's the 17th century.
like,
there weren't
the part where
riverboats back then. There were just the three-masted schooners.
You can take a canoe from the river to where it meets the ocean, where there's brackish water, and then that's where there's
Clams
the big boat.
and the oysters.
I really
and then
want to.
right next to the big boat, there'd be a big lady.
All right.
And you're like really small, and then like the lady's like really big.
Okay, so we're talking about big boat. Wait, big lake or big lady?
Big lady and a big lake. That could happen too.
So I think that
the world could be massive.
Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. I think with all
that's
this,
really
you know,
cool.
this is
I'm gonna write this
the conversation. The conversation's great. It's important that people talk to each other, people that have different opinions. But that said, we do have to take one last final call. Caller, you are on the air with electronic game information. We're talking about you're talking about the final game that's going to put on the final list of EGI 2019.
Alien Isolation.
Alien Isolation takes place on a spaceship. It's not on the list. I'm sorry.
14 hours on a ship.
It's a spaceship. We're talking about boats. So thank you for your call. It's not on the list. So we got
really?
we got 3 games on the list. We got Cold Fear, SOS, and maybe Parasite Eve. So that was the list. Thank you for your calls. I can't believe it. Another E3 is come and gone, and I feel like I feel like I've really learned a lot about myself. I really learned that all these games that are coming out, these big budget AAA games that are coming out that we're all talking about, they don't really scratch that same itch that something like Deep Fear scratched way back when. I've learned so much about Deep Fear in the lead up to this episode. I learned so much about it, and I also thought so much about things like air ducts and depleted oxygen levels. I thought a lot about that chimpanzee Anthony. What would you do if you were Anthony? What kind of questions would you have? What kind of questions would you ask the people that opened that door to that space capsule and let you into the big table? What would you say if I came up to you and I said, hey, you've been in hibernation in deep space for 40 years. And now it's time to learn who you are all over again. That's what E3 means to me. E3 is like waking up from a long hibernation, and all of a sudden all the biggest games in the world are just being blasted at you for 24 hours a day for 6 days in June every year. What are you going to do with all of that? How do you see yourself? You go home at the end of the last day of E3, you look in the mirror and you say, what the hell just happened to me? I don't know. Maybe we're never supposed to figure that out. All I know is that somewhere 300 meters below the surface of the ocean, a bunch of people are turning into creatures and losing their minds. And it's up to me, it's up to all of us, to make sure that that disease that is causing that never reaches the mainland. And that was EGI's E3 2019 coverage. EGI will be returning in September for the Tokyo Game Show, of course. But here's a big surprise, and this is an EGI exclusive first, is that Alan, myself, Ben, and Cricket will be at San Diego Comic-Con in July. We will be doing a very special live performance and a live stage performance of the game Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. We, of course, did a version of this performance a little bit before E3, and I promised you that I learned from that performance and that I'll make sure that we do something different for the San Diego Comic Convention crowd. We will be ending that performance with a live fatality. So if you're in San Diego, if you're going to the comic convention, please come to the Adult Swim paddock and watch the live fatality that we have in store. We of course are always going to be looking for your for your comments and your fan art. If you send things to electronicgameinformation@gmail.com, we will be checking that regularly. You can send things to Electronic Game Information's Twitter and Instagram. We will be active on those throughout the next few weeks as we head into San Diego Comic-Con. Until then, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.